Oi, talking about psychological tricks, right? In the weird and lying and deceptive world of what do you call them? I don't even know what they're called. Psychics. You know, these fucking lunatics who stand up in front of people and go, I'm getting a gene. I'm getting gene. Anyone? No? What about debit? I'm getting a debit. No? What about, and they just go through about 40 names until someone says, yeah, my great aunt's next door neighbour was called Olive. And they go, okay, that's right. Yeah, Olive. Well, Olive says something to do. Did she have a bad leg? What? Did a great aunt have a bad leg? I don't know a great aunt who hasn't got a bad. You know, these liars. Well, when I've said to you before, and this is going to the younger people more, both of them who watch this channel, about being honest when you're trying to attract a partner. You can do that cold reading to be honest. And it's weird that I've given you an example of deception and then said you can use that to be honest. But always look for the subtext, because the person you're talking to, because of the way we've been molded, because of the way our culture has been manipulated, you know, everyone's lying. And lying's probably a bit strong, but everyone's being deceptive. And I remember I was chatting with a girl once, and she said she was talking about her job in recruitment. And she was talking at length about it, unconvincingly. And I said, so you must be well chuffed. You must be well, you know, you're only what, like 26, and you're head of recruitment for this huge restaurant chain. You must be well happy. And she said to me, well, the money's good. So what does that mean? If you were a psychic on stage, what would you do with that comment? If someone said, well, this did happen. When she said to me, well, the money's good, I shot back at her. I said, why don't you like your job? And she was absolutely struck down by it and energized. Because in much the same way, our atomized people are crying out for connection. An addiction is the opposite of connection. And compulsion and obsession is the opposite of connection. And because our human connection is being just stripped away from us, you know, at a phenomenal rate now, you know, our ability to even say things we think, you know, that's a form of connection. To be able to be honest is to connect. And when I outright just said to her, why don't you like your job? It was something like that. You know, as soon as someone said, well, she said, well, the money's good. But there was the bit that comes before that was in her head, not in her mouth. Essentially, when she said, well, the money's good, the bit that she didn't say, but she thought was, I fucking hate it. But the money's good. And if you're not manipulating people if you just try and look for the subtext. And not only does this honesty work with partners, it works with friends, getting friends. It also works in a bar to be interesting. You know, and you've got like these, there's like all this mess between people because we've got a propaganda machine that is filling people's minds with nonsense. We've got a globalist cultural machine that's telling people to be a certain way. We live in a culture of influencers, social media influencers. They're literally called that. I mean, that sounds like something Goebbels. It's like Goebbels' wet dream. This idea of online influencers. These people who, you know, they get their fake tits and their nice photos, and they hire a couple of Ferraris to walk around in front of, and then people listen to them, and they seek to imitate them, they seek to mimic them, and that makes you a shadow of a person. It makes you a shell of a person. And so when someone comes along with some honesty, which is occasionally brutal, often savage, people love it. People love it. They react well to it because humans know when they're being deceived. But worse, humans know when they're deceiving. And if you think of someone who's absolutely under the thumb, if you think of Orwell's image of the future is a boot pushing down on a human face forever. People live there. They live in that moment. And when you can cut through that, not only do you say, when you're honest to someone, not only are you cutting through the deception, but you're saying you're giving them, what's the word I'm looking for? You're giving them the option to be honest. You're giving them the option to be themselves, which the rest of their lives doesn't cut it. They're not allowed to be themselves at work. They're not allowed to be themselves at home. They're not allowed to be themselves online. But if you're sitting down on a date, or if you're sitting down in a bar, even if you're talking to a bloke or a woman, and it's not even a sensual moment. That's not the word I'm looking for. What is it? Permission. You're giving them permission to be themselves. And that takes that takes balls. Not to be yourself, but to give someone that permission. To say to them, I'm not playing this game. I'm not playing by the rules of these monsters who are fucking our lives and civilizations up. I'm not playing by those rules. And by stepping off with honesty, you're opening up the space for them to also be themselves. And I've seen people physically change when they realize, and it's largely unconscious, they don't suddenly go, oh, he's given me permission to be myself. But, strung out. I remember this, she turned out to have anorexia, the poor girl. Strung out she was sick. First date we ever went on, right? Listen to this. First date we ever went on, I took her for a walk. I took her to some really interesting little places in Soho and told her a few little stories about them. So we had this nice, it was a lovely summer's evening. I bought her some flowers. I only met her in the street. No, tell her I met her in a restaurant. She was getting a takeaway, and I said to her, do you want to meet up for a cup of tea or something? And she said, well, let's get dinner. And I was like, all right. So when we met up, I gave her some flowers. She was very attractively dressed, but it was sort of high class, not the street trash I would have appreciated. But she looked lovely, little black dress, LBD. And so we're walking around, and she's got these flowers, and I'm telling her these little stories, not about me, but about Soho. Like I showed her the noses. I don't know if you know about the Soho noses and all this. And then we went out for a meal. Where did we go? Dean Street Townhouse. We had a porterhouse steak. So listen, the walk was about an hour. We spent about 2 hours in the townhouse. Eating was about an hour, and then an hour, a couple of glasses of wine. And then I said to her, do you want to come round to mine for a spot of bother? Do you want to come round for like a little, a bit of gin or something? I've got 6 bottles in the fridge. She came round my house, and we had a couple of little shots of gin. And then she turned around and she said, unzip my dress. And it wasn't hot. It wasn't hot, right? So I thought, well, it's on. Here we go. I do fuck on first dates. I've got no problem with that. And so it was so sensual. What a lovely thing for a woman to do. She just turned around and went, unzip my dress. And when I unzipped it, from the top of her massive breasts to under her lady parts, she was taped up in this sort of self-adhesive PVC sex tape. And the sweat underneath it was ridiculous. And I thought, she's been wearing that under her dress for like 4 or 5 hours. And I really felt for her. And years later, she said to me, 'cause it turns out she knew the staff in the restaurant that I met her in, and so did I. A little Vietnamese, well, they're not, well, they are quite small actually, but a Vietnamese family. And they told her that I was a comedian, and she Googled me before the date, and she'd read a few interviews. So she thought she'd do something a little bit naughty. And it made me feel really sad, actually. It made me feel really sad that she, strapped herself up in this, and she, it was so misjudged and awful. But when we were having dinner, she was all like her shoulders are up, and she was terrified. And I'm easy. And as soon as I cut through her belief that she had to play a part, her belief that she had to act in a certain way, as soon as I gave her permission to be herself, as soon as I gave her that, and all I had to do was be honest with her a couple of times, and her whole deportment just changed. Her shoulders went down, and this was before we'd had any drink, so you can't blame the booze. And she sat, for the first time, she sat back as well. She was like right up on the table, all her shoulders were up, her hands were like, white knuckles. But as soon as I just let her know, I don't want to play the game, I don't want to play it, I'm not interested, she just changed, physically changed. What a strung out culture we've got at the moment. I would suggest plenty of you, give me a 1 in the chat if you've been out and you've chatted to someone and you thought this person's got some severe mental issues just because the way they respond to you. You're like, oh, okay. Or you just turn to someone at a bar and sort of say something like, what's that you're drinking? They go, oh, no, it's I don't know, just some kind of, cocktail or something. Yeah. And you're like, everyone's insane. This is like a madhouse we're living in here. And this is Brave New World. This is absolutely the life of the Brave New World. And when interestingly, look at Brave New World, and they live in that utopia where everyone's got nothing. It's nothing. And if you ain't happy with it, you take Soma. What are they happy with? What actually engages them in Brave New World, in Huxley's Brave New World? The savage. The bloke who doesn't play by their rules. The bloke who doesn't lie. The bloke who's honest. The bloke who gives them permission to be who they actually are again. That's the attraction. Not the person who's succeeding in their culture, the person who's not even competing in his. And what happens once he gets absorbed into their culture? Spoiler alert, he dies.
Sehr